What went wrong, and can it be put right again?
What went wrong was you had, I think, a change in US strategy. That is, until the events of the last several days, you had a US strategy which said, we're going to meet. President Trump said several months ago the summit's going to happen. And there was a deliberate ambiguity left around the definition of the term denuclearization. Capital D, small d, somewhere in the spectrum in between. And that means a lot in terms of what actually happens on the ground. Then what happened, I think effectively in the last week, and particularly reflecting the input of National Security Advisor John Bolton, was a determination to define precisely what that meant as a precondition for the talks going in, which is everything now. And that's when the North Koreans arced up, particularly when Bolton used the Libya example. And so that, I think, is why we had this unseemly set of events in the last couple of days. On the second part of your question, can you put Humpty Dumpty back together again? You know something? Normally I would say probably not, because the North Korean regime have their own internal regime politics. You've just copped a smack in the face from the United States, having changed policies since effectively February, March of this year. Therefore, hang tough, fire off another missile test. But then you get this statement from the Vice Foreign Minister of North Korea overnight, which is sweetness and light, and President Trump's response, which is sweetness and light. So what's my baseline deduction from all that? Is it back on? It's a very qualified maybe, less than 50%, and even less again whether it be on for the 12th. There's still a lot of scrambling for position.
Well, let's go to that statement out of the Deputy Foreign Minister, Kim Dae-gwan, because he very carefully said we can do this in stages. That's what he said. We're open to talking anytime. We can do it in stages and make progress. That seems, at least thus far, to be contrary to what the U.S. position has been, which is, as you said, all or nothing. Is it realistic to do a deal like this and say it's all or nothing?
Not in a diplomatic negotiation. You just can't do it. And that is where this change in the US position from an open approach to let's shake the tree and see how much denuclearization we can get out of this, to the it's Libya, which is get rid of the lot or we're not coming, and watch out what happened with Libya phase 2. Gaddafi got taken out. So the reality, I think, is that if you're going to achieve anything through a nuclear negotiation like with Iran, it does happen in stages, and it's got external verification. So in many respects, the North Korean response is a rational one. At least it would match the rationality you have from most of the analysts in Washington who would see this happening in stages as well. And if at any stage it's not verified, deal's over. But that, David, you've hit the nail right on the head, is the guts of the North Korean Vice Foreign Minister's statement overnight.
I gotta admit, yesterday, as soon as we heard President Trump's statement, I actually called my family and said, you know what, be careful because tensions are going to escalate now on the Korean Peninsula. So I was very surprised this morning to see the reaction from Kim Dae-gwan. And also what really struck me as very interesting was when he talked about the Trump formula, that they hoped that that would work in setting things right. That's very interesting to me because it seems that North Korea is now getting a page out of the playbook of every other world leader, where you want to praise and give credit to President Trump in order to get negotiations going and get some concessions.
Well, there's a new discipline opening up at international universities. It's called Trumpology. And you know, there's psychology, there's sociology, and now there's Trumpology. Like, how the hell do you make sense of this? Put yourself in the position of your average American ally at the moment. We go out and back the President's statement yesterday saying it's off because the preconditions about denuclearization haven't been met. And 12 hours later, it's half back on again. I take all that back. I mean, I'm partly backing what the President said yesterday, and I'm certainly backing what he said tomorrow, I think. So from an allied management of allies perspective, most particularly the ROK, the good folks in the Blue House in Seoul, this is a bit of a rolling nightmare. But the guts of it you've hit again, which is this is an unusually conciliatory statement from the North Koreans. The Trump formula, pat him on the back. This paragraph which says, as David's just pointed out, let's do it over time, and the US should ponder this. And then up the top, an explicit but still measured ruling out that the DPRK could ever unilaterally scrap its nuclear weapons, but wrapped together with a nice little bow. What'll be the response? Well, you know, I was asked this last week, and my firm prediction was that 12 June would go ahead. I'm not about to make a mug of myself again.
What about China? Because President Trump seems to be putting some of the blame on President Xi Jinping's second meeting with Kim Jong-un.
Well, this is this complex strategic triangle which we have all been focused on. I think the bottom line is you are right to say that Trump has attributed a change to the North Korean position to Chinese influence. I'd respectfully say to the White House that what has happened, in fact, in the last week or so is a change in the American position about the matters we just discussed, which is whether you're going to have an absolute precondition for total denuclearization or to do it in stages, if in fact that could be achieved. So I would think that in fact the North Korean position has been relatively consistent. Therefore, President Xi Jinping's input, I don't see evidenced here. The more important thing to preserve is to ensure that we can, for the global economy, bed down the trade dispute to the extent that we can, not allow the geopolitics to come in over the top of this through a rolling set of miscalculations through language on the North Korean question.
And finally, let's talk about one other ally, South Korea. Because President Moon Jae-in, in some ways, is out there farther than anybody else. He really brought this to pass to a large degree. Didn't he get the rug pulled out from under him? What is our ongoing relationship with him? What is his role in these prospective negotiations?
Well, having been a head of government myself, my first thought about poor old President Moon was, there you are, midnight in the Blue House, and this guy comes in and says, Mr. President, we have an exciting new development from Washington.
They had to assemble a meeting at 11:30 p.m. in their residence.
I've done these things before in my own country when, let's call it, things go wrong in other parts of the world. So for a domestic political management task for President Moon, because in all democracies, even authoritarian states, everyone's got their domestic politics. This is really hard for him. Also, his inter-Korean relationship is now really on the edge. But the strategic danger for the United States is that if this is on again, off again, and leaves their allies domestically, locally exposed, the long-term fracturing of political trust between the United States and the South Koreans, in fact, is a much bigger risk than the immediacy of what we're talking about, whether a meeting's going to happen on the 12th.
And of course, not helping on the trade side, Chorus FTA being renegotiated, auto tariffs coming into place. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much.
Apart from that, everything else is going fine.